I used to think silence was a space between things. Now I know it has shape, weight, and color. Some silences are heavy like wet wool. Others are clear and metallic, like the pause before a blade falls. The photo came to me by accident. Or maybe not. It showed up in a public feed nestled between birthday wishes and a post about a golden retriever in a bow tie. A wide-angle shot of a restaurant terrace I recognized because I'd passed it once and thought how nice it would be to sit there someday with Darren. The caption read, 5 years strong, family only. I stared at the arrangement of wine glasses, the candlelight, the scattering of white rose petals along the table runner. Courtney stood beside Darren, hand on his chest, in a pale dress that caught the light like pearl. Behind them, Miranda was laughing, one arm linked through Darren's. There were toasts, cake, a violinist. My name was not in the caption. My presence not in the picture. My invitation never sent. I scrolled past it, then scrolled back. The frame captured the entire room. Enough to notice that the wooden sideboard I had given Darren and Courtney when they bought their house, the one Colin and I refinished together, the summer before he got sick, was gone. In its place stood something glossy slate gray with mirrored panels. I once read that when a person erases something, they rarely replace it with nothing. They substitute. So no one notices. I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over Darren's name. Congratulations on the anniversary. Looked beautiful, I typed, then erased it. Instead, didn't know you were having a gathering. Hope it went well. It delivered. The bubble turned blue. Nothing came back. An hour later, Courtney called. Her voice was smooth, pre-rehearsed. Helen, I think it's best if you don't make this more complicated than it is. I didn't speak. I waited. It was a small event. We didn't want drama, you understand. My hands stayed folded in my lap. I watched the steam curl from my tea lift disappear. Darren has a lot on his plate. We all do. And honestly, she paused just long enough to mean it. It just didn't feel like the right energy to include you. That was the word she used. Energy. I remembered the day I gave her that sideboard. She'd barely looked up from her phone. It's rustic, she'd said. Colin had called it solid. She called it rustic. I let Courtney finish her call. I didn't interrupt her tone of reasonableness. When she hung up, I placed the phone face down on the table and turned off the ringer. I'd known in small ways that I was being moved toward the edge. A missed thank you. A change of locks I learned about the hard way. A key card that no longer worked at the building gym when I brought their mail. But this was different. This was a public acknowledgement, a reshuffling of family with me edited out. The sideboard was just furniture. But Colin had built the drawers himself. His fingerprints were still in the glue lines beneath the varnish. I had kept one of the knobs when we moved. It was in a drawer now, wrapped in a sock next to the envelopes that held Darren's baby teeth and a faded receipt for his first soccer cleats. I don't cry easily, but there is a kind of ache that sits in the throat like a warm coin. You don't swallow it. You carry it until it dissolves or hardens. There was a time when Darren called every Sunday. Now I was lucky to get a forwarded email with no greeting. Still, I kept birthdays on the calendar. I sent cards to Courtney, though I never saw them displayed. I wasn't angry. That would have required confrontation. This was quieter. The slow retreat of someone walking backwards out of a photo. I boiled water again, though I hadn't finished the first cup. I didn't need more tea. I just needed the noise. It occurred to me then that maybe this was the final proof, not that I had been forgotten, but that I had been weighed, considered, and found inconvenient. I picked up the invitation from my neighbor's daughter's wedding, a stiff white envelope with gold edges. I ran my finger along the seal. Her name was Hannah. She had invited me even though we'd only spoken twice. That was something. I placed the envelope next to the phone. Let it be seen. Let it sit. No one had said I was not welcome, but no one had said I was. Some absences are arranged with more care than presence. That night, I folded the tea towel in half and pressed it against the countertop until the pattern of lemons blurred. I didn't sleep much. The next morning, I sat at the table again, the phone still silent. I didn't call. I didn't send a second message. Sometimes clarity is a gift no one wants to give, but you take it anyway. I understood now I hadn't been left out. I had been removed. And I decided to let that truth sit where an apology never would. There is a particular quiet that comes when you know you're being tolerated. It doesn't roar. It rests behind every word like dust on a windowsill, unspoken but thick enough to dull the light. I moved across town after Colin passed. Not because I needed help. I had managed just fine during his illness, the appointments, the long nights of stillness. I moved because Darren said it would be convenient, and I believed convenience could be a kind of closeness. I found a one-bedroom place near their house, small, manageable, with an eastern window that caught the first light. When they needed someone to wait for a package, I volunteered. When they had a late meeting, I picked up dry cleaning or signed for deliveries. I offered Sunday dinners, always phrased like a suggestion, never a request. "Oh," Courtney said once, folding a napkin slowly at the table. "We do a cleanse on weekends now, nothing heavy." I made salad the next time. No dressing. During their first Christmas in the new house, I came early with a dish and a ribbon in my hair, like I had when Darren was little. Courtney handed me a printed list and gestured toward the kitchen. "The caterer canceled. You know your way around." Miranda arrived an hour later in a fur-lined coat and sat in the center of the living room, telling stories about a resort in Tahoe. She called me sweetheart without looking up from her champagne. Darren told me later. "It was a relief you stepped in. You're so dependable." Dependable is what people call a washing machine, not a mother. On Courtney's birthday that spring, I gave her a linen handkerchief I'd embroidered in pale blue. The thread had faded a little. I'd begun it years ago and only just finished. She opened the box, blinked once, then smiled with her lips. "Oh, handmade. That's sweet." She set it on the side table beside a gift bag labeled from Miranda, which held a bracelet in a velvet box. Silver and stones. Shiny things catch the eye faster than thread. I never brought up the handkerchief again. There were small moments. They accumulate. When they painted the nursery, I offered to help. "We want it to be a bonding project," Courtney said, placing a hand on her stomach. "Just us and Miranda." When they sent out birth announcements, my name was printed in the corner in lowercase. Miranda's was in script beside the words, "Our inspiration." The day they bought the new car, Darren drove over and left the title documents on my dining table. "Could you just run this by your notary friend Courtney? Says it needs double verification." He didn't stay for tea. I let those things pass. Each one a stone in a jar, heavy enough to shift the sound of things, not loud enough to shatter. Once at a family barbecue hosted by Miranda's side, I offered to help with setup. Courtney smiled that closed smile. "You might not know how we do things here. Just relax. Don't stress." Miranda brought out wine in crystal glasses and leaned in close to someone I didn't recognize. "She means well." I folded napkins at the far end of the table. I stayed quiet because I thought silence was dignity, because I thought effort earned space, because I believed that if I gave enough, something would turn. It didn't. Still, I sent reminders for Darren's checkups. I dropped off soup when they mentioned anyone had a cold. I walked their dog for a month when Miranda had a knee injury. Courtney once told a neighbor that I was Like having a housekeeper you don't pay. The neighbor looked uncomfortable. I pretended I didn't hear. There was a cardigan I wore often, navy blue buttons replaced by mismatched wooden ones from Colin's sewing kit. Darren once picked at a thread on the sleeve. "You still wear this old thing." He used to call it my lucky sweater. The day I stopped wearing it, I folded it into a paper bag and set it at the back of the closet. I let slide the way Courtney organized seating, so I was always at the edge of group photos. The way Darren forwarded emails without reading them. The way they spoke about family traditions that had nothing to do with me. I let it all slide. Because I thought it was temporary. Because I thought love was elastic. But maybe it's not. Maybe some bonds don't stretch. They thin. They fray. And then they vanish one thread at a time. I never once raised my voice. I never once demanded. But now I begin to wonder, in all the space I made for them, where did I go? And what did I let disappear just to be allowed to stay? It's not the big moments that echo. It's the way the small ones settle in like dust inside a locked drawer. The wedding invitation came in cream cardstock with a rose gold border. My name was printed plainly. Helen. No last name. No prefix. Just Helen, tucked below a line that read, "To our beloved mom, Miranda." I remember holding an envelope under the lamp, checking the return address. It was theirs. There was no mistake. No oversight. Just a quiet removal. At the reception, I was seated near the speakers. The music rattled the water glasses. Darren made a toast. He lifted his glass to Miranda and thanked her for raising a daughter with such grace. He never mentioned my name. I wore a brooch that night, a silver leaf with a crack along the stem. Colin gave it to me on our 20th anniversary. No one asked about it. No one noticed the way I touched it when I smiled for photos. Years earlier, when I self-published my short story collection, I sent Darren the link. He said he meant to read it, but hadn't had time. The launch event was small. Friends from the library came. The clerk at the post office stopped by. Darren texted that morning, "Courtney needs help. The dog's been throwing up. Can't make it." A few days later, I saw a tagged photo of him and Miranda at a vineyard. I didn't respond. The book sits on my shelf, third from the left. He's never asked for a copy. There was a winter I slipped on ice and fractured a rib. I stayed overnight at the hospital for observation. I texted him from the ER. He replied late that evening. "Big meeting tomorrow. Can you keep me posted?" I kept the hospital bracelet in my nightstand for a while, then threw it out when I moved. I still remember the indent it left in the drawer lining where it sat too long. I'd always imagined that when I got older there would be check-ins. Not grand gestures, just small things. A note on the door, a voicemail. Instead, I began measuring his life through social media. Miranda posted a photo once of a brunch. Darren, Courtney, the girls, and Miranda clinking glasses. The caption read, "3 generations of love." I studied the table. My chair wasn't there. At a birthday dinner for one of the girls, I brought a scrapbook. Old photos from Darren's childhood. Him at the beach covered in sand, the crooked cake I baked when he turned 5. I placed it on the gift table beside a stack of brightly wrapped boxes. It was still there when I left, untouched. The bow slightly bent from someone setting a wine bottle on top. No one mentioned it the next day. Once I was helping set up chairs for a charity event Miranda hosted. She walked past me, heels echoing on the linoleum. "You don't need to overdo it, Helen. Just stay in your lane." I folded the final chair in silence. It creaked. Another time at a PTA event, Courtney waved at me from across the gymnasium. "Oh, good you came. I told them you were available. We need someone to watch Coates." I stood beside a folding table for 3 hours. They brought me a granola bar halfway through. I smiled and said thank you. No one returned for conversation. When Darren got promoted, the family held a dinner at an upscale place downtown. He didn't mention it until I brought over soup the next day. Oh yeah, it was last minute. Just a few people from Courtney's side. You know how packed things are. He didn't ask if I wanted leftovers. I noticed the extra wine glasses in the bin by the door. The last Mother's Day. I spent with them. They gave Miranda a spa package and framed photo. I received a card signed in Courtney's handwriting. Thanks for everything. No name, no comma. I tucked it into a drawer with the others. There are 8 now. One year I left a pie on their porch after a school recital. Courtney opened the door halfway. Just leave it. We're rushing out. The foil was peeled back 2 inches. I never saw the dish again. Sometimes Darren forwarded me invitations to school fundraisers with no note. Just a link and a blank subject line. I always RSVP'd. I always showed up. No one asked how I got there. There were birthdays where my gift went unopened at the end of the night. Anniversaries where my calls went unanswered. I'd leave voicemails anyway, with the weather and a recipe. I remember one in particular. Hey, we're tied up. Miranda's throwing a little get-together for Courtney. Maybe next year we do something with you. They didn't. One Christmas I brought hand-knitted scarves for the girls, pink and gray. I'd chosen the yarn carefully. Courtney opened the gift bag and gave a thin smile. Oh, these are warm. They weren't in any photos from that winter. When I once offered to babysit during flu season, Courtney looked at me and said, I think we'd rather keep exposure limited. No offense. I stood by the coat rack still holding my scarf and gloves. There was a card table in Darren's garage I gave him years ago, oak legs, hand-sanded. I noticed once it had been painted white, used for Miranda's garden club. They needed something sturdy. Darren shrugged. No big deal. I no longer ask about things I gave. Sometimes I wake and feel as if there's a word I'm forgetting. A word that used to be mine. Not a title. Not a role. Just a name that used to echo back. I began keeping track, not on purpose, but like how one counts stairs in the dark. Every missed moment folded itself into the lining of my memory like old receipts. Not heavy enough to break, but sharp at the edges. I stopped expecting anything with my name printed on it. And slowly, I began to understand being forgotten is quieter than being rejected. It comes without a door slam, without raised voices. It just stops calling your name. And you learn not to speak it either. Some people leave quietly. Others make you feel like you've left even when you're still in the room. I hadn't meant to listen. I was standing near the dining room window, watering Courtney's plants while waiting for Darren to come down. His phone was on the counter speaker, still on. I didn't touch it. The voice on the other end came in low and familiar. Just wire it directly. The foreclosure notice gave us 2 weeks. I'll handle the papers. His voice firmer than usual. Not the version I knew, but one trimmed down efficient private. We'll pull from the Roth. And the equity line. If that doesn't cover it, we'll use the condo. A pause. Then, she won't know. She doesn't need to. My hand stayed on the watering can. The spout trembled. Soil pooled dark around the philodendron. Miranda's voice followed low and pleased before the call cut off. I didn't move until the drip from the spout stopped. That same watering can once sat on my back porch by the wicker chair Alan used to oil in spring. The handle still had a dent from when it slipped out of my hand the morning we got the news. I placed it back exactly as I found it. That night, I opened the ledger I hadn't touched in over a year. The pen skipped across the page as I listed what Darren had never asked for. Not when the basement flooded. Not when their furnace broke in January. Not when Courtney's father passed and funeral costs came in heavy. Not even after their second child when I offered to help cover daycare. And yet now $120,000 for Miranda's house in Boulder. A woman who once joked, "Divorce is the best pension plan," I texted him. Just one line. "Did you mean to take a second mortgage?" No answer. 4 hours later, Courtney called. "It's a family matter," she said, "not yours." Her tone was flat professional. No anger, no hesitation. A closed file. "She needs it more than you do." I didn't respond. Not then. The following Thursday, the pharmacy left a message. Darren's name, a pickup reminder. My number was still the emergency contact. I took it as permission. They weren't home, or maybe they were pretending not to be. I knocked, waited, then left the bag at the front door. As I turned to leave, the curtain in the guest room shifted. Inside, the scent of citrus and powder lingered. Miranda wore a very specific, fragrant suite, but with that sharp undertone like burning sugar. I had never liked it. A parking pass lay on the hallway table, issued by the Boulder Municipal District, taped with her name. Beneath it, a closed envelope labeled "Refinance Terms." Darren's name on the corner. Not Darren and Courtney, just Darren. There were 2 pairs of shoes near the coat rack, Courtney's and Darren's. Miranda's leopard heels, too. Her scarf draped over the arm of the couch. The floral one she wore last Christmas, the one she'd patted my shoulder with when I gave her a book about family budgeting. She had smiled. "Oh, Helen, you're so practical." The same couch, the same scarf. I waited in the car for 20 minutes, watching the porch light flicker on and off. No one came out. That Sunday, I tried again. Darren met me in the driveway, eyes down, hands in his jacket. "You're not hearing the whole story." He didn't look at me. "There are things going on you wouldn't understand." I handed him the prescription. "I don't want this to be a debate." Then quieter. "It's Courtney's decision, too. This is her family." There was no apology in his voice. Just policy. Later that week, I stopped by again to drop off a folder Darren left at my house. Courtney answered the door. She didn't invite me in. She needs him now. "Miranda, not you." She folded her arms, blocking the entry. "Maybe it's time you learned to let go. You're not the center anymore." The folder in my hand felt heavier than it should. I didn't argue. I didn't step forward. She waited for something, maybe a protest, maybe an accusation. I gave her neither. At home, I opened the drawer where I kept the mortgage deeds. The one Alan and I paid off slowly through winters without vacations and summers without air conditioning. I ran my fingers along the faded signature line. Alan's ink had smudged in the corner from his calloused thumb. There had been times I considered selling. Once when Darren needed a car. Once when Courtney was on bed rest and couldn't work. I never mentioned it. I simply stretched my pension check a little farther. Now the house would be used for someone else's mother, a woman who never sent birthday cards, who never peeled potatoes in my kitchen or held a crying toddler on a sick night, who called me Helen, but never Mom. I went to my closet and found the sweater Darren gave me 2 Mother's Days ago. Sky blue with a tag still attached. I sat on the edge of the bed and placed it beside me. It looked too new. That night I took down the family photo from the hallway, the one with all of us on the porch, Darren standing between me and Courtney. Everyone smiling. Even Miranda off to the side, one arm raised mid-toast. I turned it over. The cardboard backing had started to peel. I didn't break the glass. I didn't throw it out. I just placed it face down quietly inside the drawer and left it there. Sometimes absence is louder than refusal. I didn't tell anyone. Not Darren, not even Louise from the book club who still called every second Tuesday without fail. I simply stopped going. I moved appointments to clinics farther out. I changed my primary care physician. When the receptionist asked if I'd need transport assistance, I said no. I removed Darren's name from the emergency contact line on the form. The pen wobbled slightly, but I didn't cross it out. I reprinted a clean page. The coffee calendar stayed pinned to the fridge. 2 Tuesdays circled in red brunch, wetter Darren and C. I left them untouched. When Tuesday came, I watered the azaleas instead. I cleared my email inbox of any message labeled family thread, unsubscribed from newsletters with subject lines like fun things to do with grandkids in Seattle. Deleted the baby photos Courtney occasionally posted in group messages, the ones where Miranda commented first. My banking logins were still in the drawer beneath the sewing basket. I kept them there after Alan passed, thinking Darren might need access just in case. That drawer hadn't been opened in over 2 years. The password still worked. The joint access, too. Darren's name sat quietly beside mine under trusted users. I revoked it. No alert went out. No message appeared. Just a silent change in permissions, the kind that only mattered when someone tried to take what wasn't theirs. I closed 2 of the investment accounts entirely. The certificates went into a manila envelope sealed and unsigned. I placed it beneath the winter quilts, next to the cedar blocks Alan always insisted on using. Nothing in me shook when I did it. There had been a time I told myself, it's better to be available just in case. But being available had turned into being erased politely. A warm body who brought pie and prescriptions nodded when told, "This isn't really your place." I remembered standing in Miranda's kitchen just once, and offering to help peel apples. She glanced down at my hands and said, "Oh no, we've got it covered. You sit." I never offered again. The next morning, I canceled the home insurance auto renewal on the house Darren used to say he'd inherit one day. He hadn't stepped foot inside in almost 10 months. The attic still held his old crib. I didn't move it. I didn't touch the box of trophies labeled State Science Fair, runner-up. But I did slide the manila envelope in beside them. That afternoon, I changed the locks. Not because I feared him, because it no longer made sense to pretend he still lived here. Later that week, I stood in the library's public computer room and typed Miranda plus foreclosure plus Boulder into the search bar. Nothing came up on the first try, but a second attempt using her maiden name pulled results from a local real estate site. Listing expired. Buyer undisclosed. A Pinterest board under her name appeared next, titles like Dream Kitchen, Reno, White Marble, Everything and Feng Shui for Wealth Corners. There was a screenshot of a luxury home loan calculator with scribbles in red ink monthly, $3,400 doable. On Zillow, her property had no current mortgage status listed. I copied the address into a note and closed the window. LinkedIn showed a career break. Full-time caregiver. Her last employer had been a PR firm dissolved 2 years ago. I opened the IRS portal and looked into the public 990s for a nonprofit she once claimed to sit on the board of. Her name had been quietly removed the previous year. I wasn't looking for scandal, just truth. Cold, clerical, unglamorous truth. Darren had once told me after Alan's funeral, "I need you close, Mom. We're a small family now, but I had never felt farther." I scrolled through old text messages, pausing on one from last year. "Sorry I didn't call. Courtney's mom needed me this week." There were no other words. I deleted it. On Saturday, I received a group invitation to a barbecue. Miranda's name listed under host. The invite came from Courtney's sister. My name was included among 50 other guests. Not Mom, not Helen, just my email. I didn't reply. I removed the email from my inbox, Then I removed the inbox from my bookmarks. I pulled the tea tin down from the top shelf and found Alan's old lighter inside still working. He used to keep it there because every good kitchen needs fire, though he hadn't smoked since '98. I lit a candle in the guest room that hadn't been used since Darren stayed over during his first year of marriage. The bed was made. The linens still smelled faintly of lavender dryer sheets, the ones I used only for guests. I sat on the edge and placed my phone screen down beside me. I had no intention of calling. I thought about the wedding photo, how the frame caught too much light, making Miranda's necklace gleam brighter than anything else in the image. How I'd smiled like I meant it. How Darren had stood with one arm around Courtney, the other in his pocket, not touching me at all. I didn't blame him. I just noticed it now. By midnight, I'd moved my pension distributions to a new account. I placed a small label on the outside of the folder, private, no shared access. In the morning, I made oatmeal, ate it in silence. The teaspoon clinked gently against the bowl, and I didn't speak. I didn't bring the dining table. There hadn't been real conversation at it for years. The movers asked twice if I was sure. One of them touched the edge of the oak top like it meant something. I said it could stay for the next family. I took the kettle, the small teacup with the fine crack, down the center, and the shoebox labeled Summer, 1998, Cannon Beach. The lease was short-term. The walls held the shadow of old frames like memories from someone else's life. The floor groaned when I stepped past the kitchen. The ceiling fan clicked when it turned. There was one window facing east. No curtains yet, just the light pouring in through thin glass and dust lines. I kept the window cracked each night not for the breeze, but to prove that no one could stop me from doing something so simple. The studio came with a bed. The frame tilted slightly to one side. I didn't fix it. The first morning I walked to the cafe on the corner, the waitress didn't know my name. She asked if I wanted cream. I said yes. She didn't ask about my family or whether I lived nearby. She placed a napkin under the cup without comment. I opened my notebook, the one with the green elastic band fraying now at the corners. If no one asks today whether he called, I'll be fine. That was all I wrote. I finished the tea. I left a tip. I returned the next morning and the next. No one asked me who I used to be. At night, I lay on the tilted bed and stared at the ceiling. The crack in the plaster reminded me of the one on Darren's chin when he was small from that swing on 9th Street Park. I used to press my thumb there when he couldn't sleep. Now I pressed my hand against my chest and waited for silence to do its work. No tears came, just the weight of a face no longer worn. A silence no longer mistaken for weakness. I didn't call anyone to give my new address. I brought one photo. Darren at 12, holding a model airplane, grinning with a gap-toothed confidence that hadn't yet turned into calculation. I placed it on the windowsill half behind the tea tin. The rest stayed in boxes. Not out of grief, just unneeded. I reread my own notes from years ago. A passage about the meaning of absence in poetry. The space around a word can sometimes say more than the word itself. I underlined it again. I opened my laptop and returned to the trail I had started in the library Miranda. She had once said flippantly over Thanksgiving, "Stuffing. Passive income is the real American dream." I'd smiled, not understanding. That was before the PayPal statements, the Etsy store under a pseudonym, and the ebook guides on spiritual cleansing that she marketed with stock photos and vague testimonials. I found the business name under a Nevada LLC. The website was polished. The About page described a divorced mother who learned to manifest her wealth. The Contact tab linked to a Shell email address and a forwarding service in Delaware. I didn't feel anything when I read it. Just observed. The tax records were more revealing. 2 years unfiled. one pending audit flag from a notice buried in a public index, a link to a property listed under a family trust, name 1 not matching hers nor Darren's. Estimated value $1.2 million. I opened the Zillow page again. The last buyer had no photo. The transaction showed as undisclosed funds cash. The house had been remodeled with white stone exteriors, modern fencing, and double driveways. I stared at the image until the screen dimmed. I opened the image again. The days passed without a calendar. I folded my clothes by instinct. I read old poetry anthologies from the library bin. I wrote a list each morning: T-Walk file, look again. I crossed nothing out. No one knocked on the door. One afternoon, a package arrived addressed to Helen J. No one else would know that name. Inside, a flyer from Darren's new venture, a startup investment fund for visionary families. The card read, "Hope you'll consider helping us grow." There was no personal note. I placed the flyer face down and made tea. That evening, I took out the photo again. The boy in it was still 12, still proud. I tried to recall the exact moment the photo was taken. I couldn't. I clicked through Miranda's online shop again. The reviews were effusive. 5 stars. Repeat customers. Mentions of quick shipping, positive energy, and a handwritten thank you card. I looked up the shipping address on a business form. The account had been flagged for volume inconsistencies. Her name didn't appear. Only initials. I noted it down. Quietly. I wasn't chasing revenge. I wasn't even chasing clarity. I was just refusing to lie to myself again. The kettle hissed. I poured slowly, watching the steam blur the edge of the cup. The chipped rim felt smooth from years of use. I didn't check the mailbox the next day. I didn't call Darren. I didn't tell anyone about what I had found. I sharpened a pencil and kept looking. He didn't call when I moved out. Not when the change of address was filed, not when his birthday passed without a card from me, not when I stopped replying to Courtney's group texts or stopped sending soup when James had the flu. He only called when Miranda got arrested. I had just poured hot water over a chamomile bag, letting it steep in the chipped mug with the faded cornflower print. I remember because I watched the yellow swirl of the tea settle as the screen lit up with Darren's name. The phone rang 4 times. I let it. Then I picked up. "Mom, did you hear?" Not a greeting. Not even my name. Just a question, raw and unfinished. I waited. They arrested Miranda this morning. Something about unpaid taxes. Some property stuff. I don't even know. "Did you know I set the mug down?" It tapped softly against the counter. "I knew," I said. "I'm the one who submitted the evidence." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was crowded with years he never looked closely enough. All the dinners I showed up for. The birthdays I remembered even when he forgot mine. All the times I let Miranda cut me off mid-sentence and Courtney change the subject when it was my story. He never saw those things, but now he saw this. "You destroyed her," he said. The words were steady, not shouted, like he'd been holding them back too long. I almost asked him, "And what did she do to you?" But I didn't. "She was helping us," he went on. "She was family. I was too. That's all I said." He hung up. Later that evening, Courtney sent a message. No greeting. Just, "I don't think we'll ever be able to forgive you." I stared at it for a long time before deleting it. I didn't reply. There was nothing I could say that wouldn't be interpreted as justification or guilt. I had neither. 2 days later, I got a call not from Darren, but from his lawyer, a clipped voice, very polite. "Ms. Weller, just a courtesy call. We've reviewed the transfer records. Had Mr. Weller proceeded with the $120,000 payment, there's a possibility he could have been named as a co-conspirator under state fraud statutes. Your prior documentation to the IRS effectively shielded him. We're encouraging him to cooperate fully with the ongoing case. I thanked the man, though I don't remember his name. After I hung up, I folded the hand towel next to the sink. Then I folded it again and again. No one thanked me. No one needed to. Later that week, Darren sent a voice message. Not a call. Not even typed words. Just his voice in a 10-second recording. Things are complicated. I need time. I didn't play it again. I didn't reply. I used to trace the lines in his baby book, the little footprint they stamped at the hospital, the soft arch of his tiny heel. Now I traced the ink of property records. Miranda had held a Nevada LLC registered under a shell name with 3 short-term rental homes listed under different addresses. She had leveraged her homelessness as grounds for a hardship loan while earning 6 figures from online resale. There were screenshots, bank statements, even social media captions about manifesting abundance. It wasn't vengeance. It was clarity. Courtney's last message came a week later. You turned him against us. She always said us like it was a kingdom. I was never sure if Darren was the prince or the subject. I didn't reply to that either. Instead, I refolded the scarf Darren gave me for Mother's Day 6 years ago. It still smelled faintly of the rose perfume he used to steal spritzes of when he was 7. The studio felt different after that. Not bigger, just lighter, as though something had uncoiled from the corners of the room. I swept twice that morning, cleaned the kettle even though it wasn't dirty. I deleted voicemails. I unsubscribed from the mailing list Courtney had signed me up for, the one that sent daily affirmations about embracing gratitude. I stopped checking their social media, not out of detachment, but because the story there was always too polished, too distant from truth. Birthday balloons, holiday meals, perfectly filtered sunrises. Nowhere in there was the mug I used to set out for Darren, the one that said, "Best son ever." It had a chip on the handle. I kept it anyway. I went to the cafe again that Sunday. Same corner seat. Ordered green tea this time. The barista, a girl with a nose ring and gentle eyes, asked if I wanted honey. I said no. I brought my notebook. Wrote a line across the top of the page. Sometimes protecting someone means letting them hate you for it. Then I drew a small circle underneath it. I didn't label it. Just a circle. Empty, but whole. I never told anyone I turned in Miranda. Not the neighbors, not the old friend who texts every 3 months with emojis and memories. Not even my sister, who would have said, "Told you she was trouble from day one." I didn't need that kind of righteousness. The law would handle it. The silence was mine to hold. I sat with that thought for a while. Not as punishment, just as proof that I had once been a mother who tried to love enough for everyone, that now I was something else entirely. And when the phone buzzed again the next day, I let it ring 5 times. Then I turned it off. It took me a long time to stop flinching at the sound of my own ringtone. There was a time I would reach for the phone mid-bite, mid-walk, mid-thought, just in case it was him. Now I let it buzz, then watched it quiet itself. That silence was no longer an absence. It was space. I started working at the local library 3 mornings a week. The shelves didn't talk back. No one there asked about my family. They just returned their books on time and said thank you when I handed over receipts. Sometimes a child would forget a mitten on the story rug. I would fold it and place it behind the counter. No names, no assumptions. That small act of care didn't require memory or forgiveness. It just was. One Tuesday, Courtney sent an email. Subject: Let's talk for the family's sake. The body read, We think it would be best if we could present a united front again. Maybe a dinner. Just a casual photo for the holiday card. No drama, just closure for appearances. I read it twice. Not because it surprised me, but because of how little space I took up in her words. A silhouette at a table, a face for symmetry, something easily cropped. I didn't respond. Instead, I brought out an old box from the hallway closet. Inside, a folded sketch pad, still faintly marked with graphite smudges. I hadn't drawn in over 30 years. Not since Darren was little and liked to sit beside me scribbling tornadoes while I tried to get the curve of a window just right. Back then, every hobby came with a timer. The minute someone needed a snack or a form signed, the pencils went back in their cup. I used to think I'd pick it up again once there was more time. Turns out I had to lose everything else to get it. The community center had a drop-in watercolor group. No critiques, just soft music, shared brushes, and women who didn't care about last names. My first attempt was a view of the river from memory. Not precise. A little muddy in the trees, but the sky turned out better than I expected. I mounted it in a simple wooden frame, flipped it over, and wrote in pencil on the back. Not for hanging. Just proof I once dared to draw. That weekend, Darren called again. Not with remorse, not with questions. Courtney wants to know if you'll join us for a brunch next Sunday, just to reset things a little. I paused. Are you asking me to apologize a beat? She just thinks it'd help. People still talk, you know. I stared at the chipped edge of my table, the one I hadn't sanded down. I liked it that way. Real things should show wear. You can tell her no, I said. No brunch, no reset. Another pause. Then, you used to be more forgiving. And you used to call me Mom. He exhaled, tired, not furious, and the line went still. I ended the call without waiting for him to. The next week, I went to the cafe on Pine and 3rd. The server, a man with silver hair and a red apron, remembered my order. Earl Grey, dry toast, no jam. Your usual spot, he asked. I nodded. Table by the window, one chair, no expectation. At the table behind me, a younger couple argued in hushed tones about Christmas plans. Whose parents? Which flight? Who always gets their way? I sipped my tea and let it settle at the back of my throat. Once, I would have offered advice. Now I folded the napkin twice and watched the steam fade. The next painting I made was of an old tree roots exposed in a wash of brown and deep blue. I titled it Holding Anyway. No one asked what it meant. That was the point. At night, I read without watching the clock. I let myself underline things, write in margins. Sometimes I wrote questions no one would answer, just to see how they looked on paper. One line stayed with me. You don't become whole by being needed. You become whole when you choose. I taped it above the sink. Not centered, just visible. There was a knock one afternoon, Courtney. She stood stiffly on the porch, arms folded in a coat too clean for wind. I didn't invite her in. She handed me a white envelope. It's from Darren. He couldn't come. I took it, held it without opening. She glanced over my shoulder into the apartment. No shoes near the door. No framed photos. No sign of legacy. You've made this very difficult, she said. I nodded. I know. I mean for the family. Her eyes searched for guilt. I gave her silence. She shifted her weight. He still hasn't been sleeping. I sleep fine, I said. That ended it. Inside the envelope, a birthday card. No message. Just Darren in rushed ink. No love. No mom. I placed it under the teapot to keep the corner from curling. At the library, a child asked if I had any books about dinosaurs. I showed him 3. He picked one with a torn cover. Why this one, I asked. He shrugged. It looks like it's been read a lot. I checked it out under his name. There are things I've stopped waiting for. A text, an apology, a version of me that fits better inside their lives. But there are also things I've begun to collect again. A brush stained at the edge with indigo. The shape of my name written by my own hand on a new lease. A book someone else once loved. And on most mornings when I leave the studio, I take one look back, not to see what I'm missing, but to remind myself that I closed the door. I had been erasing myself quietly for months. But a true erasure requires one last stroke, the kind done not out of fury, but certainty. I placed the old ledger on my lap. The corners were soft, the paper worn thin from years of updates. Darren's name sat beside mine on 3 accounts, 2 property deeds, and a family trust I had once called our safety net. I didn't flinch. I turned each page signed, my side drew a single underline beneath my name. Not a flourish, not a pause. Just finality. The printer sputtered as it spat out the compiled statement, 5 years' worth of transactions, interest deeds, and legal addendums. I clipped it together with a silver binder I found in the bottom drawer. The same drawer that used to hold birthday cards I never sent. I wrote a single line by hand on thick cream stationery and folded it over the packet. Effective immediately, I withdraw my name from all co-owned accounts and assets. I relinquish all rights, expectations, and protections previously granted. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. Not from paper, but history. At the bottom of the drawer was a velvet box. The corners were fraying, but I still knew the weight before I opened it. Inside lay the ring that belonged to my grandmother. A dull sapphire the shape of a tear set into a band of gold that had darkened over the years. I had cleaned it only once when Darren was born. There had been a time I pictured slipping that ring into the hand of his daughter. A quiet moment by the fire, a story about the women who wore it before. That child never arrived. I was never asked. Still, I wrote the note and tucked it beneath the velvet for the granddaughter I've never met. If one day she asks who tried to keep things honest, let this be your proof. I didn't wrap it in tissue. I didn't tie a bow. I slid the box beside the envelope in a padded mailer and sealed it without pressing too hard. At the post office, I paid in cash. The woman behind the counter smiled without recognizing me. I slid the package forward and asked for certified delivery. Her fingers tapped the keys. Is this going to a family member? I looked at her name tag. It's going to someone I used to know. Outside, the wind caught the tail of my coat. I let it pull. A week later, Courtney's name appeared in my inbox. No subject line, no greeting. We don't need your silent judgments. You chose to be irrelevant. This performance won't rewrite that. I read it once, then again. I closed the laptop and set the kettle on the stove. At noon, my phone buzzed. Darren's number. I didn't answer. Later, a voicemail came through. His voice was clipped. I got your envelope. Fine, if this is how you want it, but don't expect anything else. I didn't expect anything. That had ended the day he turned his back without checking if I had food in the fridge. I left the voicemail unopened. I kept a white ceramic bowl by the window where the light touched it in the afternoons. I began dropping my keys there each day when I returned from the library. I used to hang them by the door at his house. His hook was labeled Mom. This bowl had no label. It didn't need one. I started a new painting the next morning. Not a landscape this time, but an object, study, a hand reaching, not holding. I didn't need to explain whose. At the market, I ran into a former neighbor from my old street. Her eyes swept over my coat. Still alone, Helen. Still whole, I replied, and turned back to the produce. I saw a mother holding her baby rocking gently near the oranges. The baby laughed. The mother wasn't looking. I passed them quietly and didn't count what I hadn't lived. That night, I refolded the blue cardigan I used to wear to Darren's parent-teacher meetings. I'd kept it too long. It smelled faintly of chalk and car air freshener. I placed it in the donation box. I added the apron I'd worn every Thanksgiving and the ceramic plate that had once held his first birthday cake. I left one thing behind the red mug with the chip in the rim. I sipped from it now, mornings and nights. It kept me grounded. No one thanked me for stepping back. No one offered warmth in place of the space I vacated. Courtney posted a family photo the next weekend. Darren, her, and their son standing in front of the fireplace. My name was not mentioned. I turned off my computer. I stared at the photo frame on my table. Darren, age 12, smiling through a missing front tooth, his arm around a golden retriever named Baxter. I didn't cry. I dusted it. I set it back. Closure doesn't arrive in a letter. It doesn't slam a door. It simply no longer knocks. I didn't block his number. I didn't change mine. But I stopped carrying the phone into the bedroom. I stopped waiting for it to ring. Some days I still hear his voice in passing crowds. Not the adult one, but the child version, high-pitched and unsure, calling out from the soccer field. I let that voice fade. I chose not to reply. And that was the choice that mattered. I used to think redemption came wrapped in apologies, but now I think it simply comes from not needing one. The kettle clicked off by itself. I didn't rush to pour the tea. I waited until the steam curled above the spout like a quiet exhale. The chamomile I used came from a small tin I found at a second-hand store, wedged behind outdated cocoa mix. I liked how the tin dented slightly at the corner, and how the label peeled without losing its name. I reached for my mug blue with a faint crack down the handle, the kind of flaw that doesn't make it useless, just honest. I didn't use the mugs from the old house anymore. They had matching patterns, but no memory. This one had character and heat. Across the table sat the letter I never mailed. The envelope yellowed at the corners. My handwriting curved gently across the front, Darren, in case you ever want to know. I never sealed it. There was nothing in it I hadn't already lived. I had written it on a Tuesday, not because of an event, but because the light had come through the window in such a way that reminded me of his baby blanket, the one with stitched clouds. That letter had no apology, no accusations, no longing. Just one sentence centered on the page. The day you understand, I didn't betray you. I simply refused to assist the betrayal. You'll know where to find me. There was no address. Just a name. Mine. I hadn't changed my number. I hadn't blocked anyone, but I'd stopped checking. That's not the same as giving up. It's just the absence of permission for others to rearrange my peace. The lavender stalk on the windowsill had dried fully. I turned the jar slightly so the light passed through the glass and caught the air above it, like breath held mid-prayer. Behind it, the family photo still stood crooked in its frame, the only picture where Darren smiled without being told to. I hadn't taken it down. I'd just stopped dusting around it with care. A knock came once last week, just once. Not at the door, in my chest. A flicker of thought maybe today, but I let it pass like any other small ache, familiar and undeserving of alarm. They had stopped calling after the paperwork cleared. I had removed my name from the joint financial accounts. I had submitted my disassociation from the trust. I had mailed the heirloom locket wrapped in linen, addressed not to Darren, but to his daughter, whom I had never met. With it, a single note. If someday you wonder why your name stayed clean, Know that someone who loved you before you existed made it so. The post office clerk didn't ask questions. The line moved slowly. I watched an old man argue about stamps while a teenager behind him stared into his phone, unaware he was next. Nothing important seemed to be happening, and yet everything quietly was. My rent was paid through spring. The library still called me Miss Helen, even though I told them just Helen was fine. They never pushed. I filed books, reshelved biographies, refilled bookmarks. I kept the quiet that others walked right through without seeing. Courtney had sent a message 3 days after the arrest. Not a call, a message. It said, "You didn't have to go that far." I didn't reply. I didn't even flinch. That was the mercy. That her words, once sharp, now fell without weight. That's how I knew I wasn't the same. There's a peace in not defending yourself. At the bottom of my sock drawer sat the birthday card Darren never delivered. I found it by accident, tucked into my old recipe box. Inside, no message, just his name and the date. I think he had intended to write something, or perhaps he never could. The space where words might have gone said more than anything he could have scrawled. I kept it. Not for comfort, but for clarity. Sometimes people bring nothing and leave less. And sometimes you survive anyway. I didn't tell anyone about the painting. The one I finished late one night with the kitchen light on taped across the counter. A seascape gray blues distant shoreline. No boat. I didn't sign it. I didn't show it. I hung it behind my bedroom door where only I could see. On the back, I had written not to impress. Just to remember I had hands that still made things. The heater clicked twice. I didn't move to adjust it. I just watched the light change on the wall across from me. Shadows from the lavender danced lightly against the paint, like silent thoughts brushing past, without needing to linger. I could hear my neighbor's dog bark muffled by the wall. I never minded. It made the building feel less hollow. My reflection in the glass door looked smaller than I remembered, but steadier. I was still here, still whole, just not the same shape I once was, when all I had to offer was my place in someone else's story. The calendar on the fridge showed a blank day. No events, no reminders. That used to scare me. It didn't anymore. The tea had cooled just enough. I took a sip. The warmth didn't spread like fire. It settled like weightless cloth. Familiar. Steady. I reached for the small notebook beside the jar. Its pages had bent corners and pen smudges. I had filled it slowly. Not every day, but often enough. The final page waited one last space unclaimed. I wrote, "I don't need to be proven right. I only needed to no longer be erased from my own life." I closed the notebook. Not with force, just with finality. Outside, no one waited. But inside, I did not feel absent. Just enough.